Scientists just found microplastics inside human brain tissue, not in the gut, not in the lungs, not in the bloodstream, in the brain itself, the actual thinking organ. And the amount they found was not trace, not negligible. In some samples, the concentration of microplastic particles in brain tissue was higher than what was found in the liver or kidneys. Let that land for a second. Your brain, the most protected organ in your body, shielded by the blood-brain barrier, a biological security system so selective it blocks most medications from even getting through. Microplastics are getting through it. This wasn't a fringe study. This was published in Nature Medicine, one of the most respected peer-reviewed journals on the planet. Researchers analyzed post-mortem brain samples and found measurable concentrations of nanoplastics and microplastics embedded in brain tissue. And here's the part that should make you put down whatever plastic bottle you're holding right now. The concentrations in 2024 samples were significantly higher than samples from just 8 years earlier. We are accumulating this material faster than any previous generation in human history. So when you wake up feeling foggy, when your thinking feels slow and your motivation feels flat and no amount of sleep seems to fix it, when you sit down to do focused work and your brain just refuses to cooperate, the medical establishment calls it brain fog and usually points to stress, poor sleep, or anxiety. And yes, those things matter. But what nobody is telling you is that there may be a physical, chemical, measurable reason your brain is not functioning the way it should, and it has nothing to do with your mindset. It's particles, actual physical particles, sitting inside your neural tissue right now. But the brain story is just the beginning, because what microplastics are doing to your hormones is arguably even more dangerous. And it's happening silently, gradually, in every single person reading this, regardless of how clean you eat or how much you exercise. Here's the biochemistry you need to understand. Plastics contain chemical compounds called phthalates and bisphenols. You've heard of BPA. But BPA-free doesn't mean chemical-free. Manufacturers simply swapped BPA for BPS and BPF, which early research suggests may be equally or more disruptive. These compounds belong to a class called xenoestrogens. Xeno means foreign. These are estrogen-mimicking molecules that your body cannot distinguish from its own estrogen. Now picture this. Your endocrine system runs on molecular precision. Hormones are like keys, and receptors are like locks. The right key opens the right lock and produces the right biological response. Xenoestrogens are skeleton keys. They fit into your estrogen receptors and activate them inappropriately at the wrong time in the wrong concentration, sending signals your body never intended to send. For women, this disrupts the delicate ratio between estrogen and progesterone. Progesterone is your calming, stabilizing hormone. It supports sleep, reduces anxiety, maintains the uterine lining, and balances estrogen's proliferative effects. When synthetic xenoestrogens flood estrogen receptors constantly, progesterone production gets suppressed, the ratio shifts. And the downstream effects are things like irregular cycles, worsening PMS, difficulty sleeping, mood instability, and in chronic cases, a higher risk of estrogen-dominant conditions. For men, the mechanism is different but equally destructive. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland monitor circulating estrogen levels as part of the feedback loop that controls testosterone production. When xenoestrogens artificially elevate the perceived estrogen signal, the brain interprets this as a sign that testosterone production should slow down. It's called negative feedback suppression. The result is lower LH output, which means the testes receive a weaker signal to produce testosterone, and you end up with a man who has normal lifestyle habits, reasonable sleep, and decent nutrition but chronically low testosterone. Because his own feedback system has been hijacked by plastic. This is not speculation. A 2021 study published in the journal Human Reproduction found that men with higher urinary phthalate concentrations had significantly lower testosterone levels. Another study from the Mount Sinai School of Medicine found that prenatal phthalate exposure was associated with altered hormone profiles in children years later. The science is not emerging. The science is here. What's missing is the conversation. But here's what I want you to understand. This is not a doom story, because the human body has extraordinary detoxification capacity, and there are four specific, science-supported strategies that can meaningfully reduce your plastic and chemical burden. Not detox teas, not marketing claims. Biochemistry. The first is sweat, specifically deliberate, sustained heat exposure through sauna. Your skin is an excretory organ. Most people think of the kidneys and liver as the body's detox system, and they are. But sweat is a legitimate excretion pathway for specific compounds, and research has confirmed that phthalates and certain plastic-associated chemicals are measurably excreted through sweat. A 2018 study published in the journal Environmental International analyzed sweat samples and found phthalate metabolites in concentrations that suggested sweat as a meaningful elimination route, particularly for compounds that the kidneys were excreting at lower rates. But the mechanism goes deeper than just sweating. Heat exposure triggers the production of heat shock proteins. These are molecular chaperones, proteins that your cells produce in response to thermal stress. Their job is to identify misfolded or damaged proteins, repair them, or flag them for elimination. What's emerging in the research is that heat shock proteins also play a role in cellular stress response to chemical toxicants, helping cells manage and clear some of the burden created by environmental chemical exposure. The protocol that the research most commonly references is 15 to 20 minutes in a sauna at approximately 80 degrees Celsius, 3 to 4 times per week. Infrared saunas operate at lower temperatures but penetrate tissue more deeply, and some researchers believe they may be more efficient at mobilizing stored compounds from subcutaneous fat, where many lipophilic chemicals accumulate. Either modality has value. Consistency matters more than perfection. The second strategy is glutathione support, and this one is about your liver. Your liver processes chemical toxicants through a two-phase system. Phase 1 uses enzymes to break down the compound into an intermediate form. Phase 2 conjugates that intermediate, meaning it attaches a molecule to it to make it water-soluble so it can be excreted through bile or urine. Phase 2 is where glutathione becomes critical. Glutathione is your body's master antioxidant and a primary conjugating molecule in Phase 2 detoxification. Without adequate glutathione, Phase 2 stalls, and partially processed toxicants can actually become more reactive and more harmful than the original compound. The problem is that modern life depletes glutathione rapidly. Chronic stress, alcohol, processed food, environmental chemical load, and aging all reduce glutathione levels, so you need to actively support production. The most direct dietary approach is N-acetylcysteine, or NAC. NAC is a precursor to glutathione, meaning your body uses it as raw material to build more of the molecule. The research on NAC and liver detoxification is robust. Beyond supplementation, cruciferous vegetables are your most powerful food-based tool. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage contain a compound called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane activates the ON-ARF2 pathway, which is essentially the master switch for your body's antioxidant and detoxification gene expression. When RFDU is activated, your liver upregulates production of glutathione and Phase 2 detox enzymes simultaneously. 3 to 4 servings of cruciferous vegetables per week, lightly steamed to preserve the enzyme myrosinase needed for sulforaphane conversion, is a research-supported target. Alpha-lipoic acid is another compound worth understanding. It both boosts glutathione production and regenerates oxidized glutathione back into its active form, essentially recycling your detox capacity. The third strategy is the controversial one, and I want to be extremely clear that this requires medical supervision and individual evaluation. But the science is real and the conversation is happening. Blood donation and its effect on PFAS levels. PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are the so-called forever chemicals. They don't break down in the environment, and they don't break down easily in the human body either. They accumulate in blood, serum, and tissue over decades. PFAS exposure has been linked to thyroid disruption, immune suppression, altered lipid metabolism, and hormonal interference. A study published in the journal Science of the Total Environment examined PFAS serum concentrations in blood donors and found that regular blood donors had meaningfully lower PFAS levels compared to non-donors. The proposed mechanism is simple. You donate blood. Your body produces new blood to replace it. The new blood starts with a lower PFAS concentration. Over time and with regular donation, your total body burden decreases. A separate study from Australia, published in JAMA Network Open, found that men who underwent bloodletting procedures showed reduced PFAS serum concentrations. The researchers were cautious about drawing clinical conclusions, but the biological mechanism is straightforward and plausible. Now here's the important caveat. Blood donation has eligibility criteria. Not everyone qualifies. And you should never donate blood primarily for detoxification purposes. The blood supply is a medical resource, and donation is an act of generosity that saves lives. But if you are eligible, healthy, and already considering regular donation, the metabolic data suggests a meaningful secondary benefit that is worth discussing with your physician. The fourth strategy is filtration. And this is the most immediately actionable thing you can do today. The primary source of daily microplastic and chemical ingestion for most people in developed countries is tap water and water stored in plastic containers. Municipal water treatment does not effectively remove nanoplastics or PFAS compounds. Standard carbon filters, including most countertop pitchers, remove some contaminants but are not sufficient for PFAS or nanoplastic removal. Reverse osmosis is the only widely available residential filtration technology shown to remove PFAS, nanoplastics, phthalates, heavy metals, and chlorine byproducts simultaneously. A 2020 study found that reverse osmosis systems removed greater than 90% of PFAS compounds from tap water. Under-sink reverse osmosis units range from $150 to $400 and represent one of the highest impact single purchases you can make for long-term hormonal and neurological health. Additionally, stop drinking from plastic bottles, especially bottles that have been heated, left in a car, or used repeatedly. Heat dramatically accelerates the leaching of plastic compounds into water. A study published in the journal Water Research found that water stored in plastic bottles left in a warm environment for extended periods contains significantly higher concentrations of antimony and phthalate compounds than freshly filled bottles. Use glass or stainless steel. It is not a lifestyle aesthetic choice. It is a meaningful reduction in your daily chemical exposure. Here's where we are. Microplastics are in your brain. The evidence is published, peer-reviewed, and sitting in journals that the medical establishment respects. Plastic-derived chemicals are mimicking estrogen, suppressing testosterone, destabilizing progesterone, and interfering with the very hormonal signaling that governs your energy, your mood, your cognition, and your body composition. And the exposure is continuous, every day, through your water, your food packaging, your air, and your personal care products. But your body is not helpless. Regular sauna use activates sweat-based excretion and heat shock protein pathways. Cruciferous vegetables and NAC support the liver's phase 2 detoxification through glutathione and sulforaphane. Blood donation, for those who are eligible, offers a meaningful reduction in PFAS serum burden. And reverse osmosis filtration cuts your single largest daily source of ingestion. This is not about fear. This is about information. The people who understand this biology and act on it are going to have a measurable advantage in cognitive performance, hormonal health, and long-term disease risk over the people who don't. You now have the information. If this changed the way you think about your daily environment, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more content built on real science. And drop a comment below telling me which of these 4 steps you are implementing first. I read every single one.